Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Fran said, I'm Stuart Hamilton from Intend Business Development. I've been an associate with Intend for 7 years, worked with the Supplier Development Programme for most of that time, and have been involved with public sector tendering for a long time before that. So the plan this afternoon is for me to take you through a PowerPoint presentation first, which won't last too long, to show you exactly what you need to be doing in order to register for this contract and to go ahead with the submitting. And then I'll go on live to the Public Contracts Scotland and Public Contracts Scotland tenders sites so that you can see a live demonstration of how to go about that. Now, I always say, I do a lot of these, that I don't like to leave anybody behind in this, so I'd make no assumptions at all about how much anyone knows or doesn't know. I prefer to work on the basis that I'm telling you something that taking it from scratch, so that if I do tell you something that's extremely obvious or you already know that, please excuse me, but there might be somebody else on the webinar who has not gone through this process before and is looking at it really from stage one. So I'm going to take it as if you don't know anything, and if you do know it, good and well. It's just maybe a reminder. So in terms of the agenda, we are going to be looking at registering on Public Contracts Scotland, or PCS, as I'll be referring to it from now on. And that's the standard industry acronym. Everyone tends to refer to PCS. Then we'll be looking at, on PCS, how to find the contract notice. Then we'll look at how you register on PCS Tender, which is a separate portal from PCS and the one that North Lanarkshire Council are using to manage this this contract. There is another webinar that you can attend another time if you want, as to the background to PCS and PCST and why there are two and so on. It's not really important today, other than to say that you would be looking at PCS to find the contract notice, then going across to PCST to submit your tender, and I'll show you how to do that. We'll look at how you would express interest in the contract. We'll look at how you should respond to it. We'll look at downloading and accessing the contract documents. I will take you through the question and answer procedure, which is very quick for a live tender. And we'll do all this in PowerPoint. We'll mention this in PowerPoint. Then I'll go on to do the live demonstration. And finally, we'll finish up by looking at some of the documents that you need to upload in order to complete your tender. So that's the plan, that's the agenda. And first of all, what you would do is you need to go to Public Contracts Scotland, PCS. This is the landing page for it. When I do the live demo later on, you'll see that the URL for it is publiccontractscotland.gov.uk, but you'll see that later. And if you aren't already registered for this portal, then you would do so here at the register button. What that takes you through is to this page here, where you're able to register as a supplier. It's a very simple process to do that. It will only take you a couple of minutes, and all they're really looking for is very basic company information indeed. So there's nothing, you don't need to set much time aside to do it. You could do it very quickly indeed. And once you're registered, then you're able to log in and use the portal fully. So having done that, I won't bother to show you how to do it. It's so straightforward. You would come back to the login page on for PCS, and you would use your email address as your username and the password that you created when you registered for the site. And that will then take you through to this page here, which is the landing page, if you like, once you've logged in. Now, a number of tabs across the top here. The only one you'll really be interested in is the Suppliers tab. That's all we're going to be using this portal for here, is to search for the notice. You could also do it under this Search Notice tab. It doesn't matter which way you do it, you'll be brought through to the same screen. But when you log in to PCS, this is the screen you'll come to in the Suppliers area, and you would go down here to search for latest notices. So you could do it to this tab here if you wanted to. So going into the latest notices tab, the first thing to mention is you'll see here there are about 1,300 pages and 13,000 records in here of current contract notices, past contract notices, prior information notices, and so on. And these are all the records that are able to be displayed in here. So the quickest way to get to the contract for this North Lanarkshire Council is, well, the very quickest way we can type a reference number in here, which I'll give you later on. But if you're coming back to this later and you can't remember the reference number, just simply type in the keyword Cumbernauld, go to notice type here, there's a drop-down menu, current opportunity, and search. And when you do that, here, Cumbernauld, current opportunity, search, it brings you up with this notice here, the management services for Centre Cumbernauld. The reference number here, APR 528403. If you do have a note of it, when you're searching later on, you could put that reference number in here and search instead of having to put in Cumbernauld and current opportunity. But either way, this will bring you through to the hyperlink for the contract that you're interested in here, where you see that although the contract is advertised on this site, the buyer is not using this site for you to respond to the contract, to the notice. They're using PCS Tender, which is a separate website, and you need to register to be able to use that as well. And we'll look at that too. What you would do here, we'll see it live, is I'm assuming that because you're on this webinar that you are interested in bidding for this tender. But if you're not sure, what you would be able to do is to go into the full notice text here in this tab, and it will give you all the information that you would need in order to be able to decide whether or not you want to go for the contract or not before you go across to PCST and PCS Tender and express your interest. So there's a lot of information contained in here, which we'll see when we go online. But the important thing at the moment is to see that you need to go to the PCS Tender website and you need to search for project code 28170. And we're going to use that to be able to find the contract in the other site. So once we've done that, that will be all we'll be doing in here. We won't be coming back to PCS again. It's purely and simply there for contract notice information and to take you across to the other site. The URL for this site is one that you would probably want to store, because it's www.publictenderscotland.publiccontractscotland.gov.uk, which again you'll see later on. But if you were following the link from PCS, it would bring you straight through here. And again, as before, you can register as a supplier here, and the registration process for PCS Tender, PCST, is also straightforward, but it just takes a little bit longer than it does for the other site because they ask for a little bit more information. But it's still a straightforward process, nothing to be concerned about. If you set aside a few minutes to do it, you'll be able to register as a supplier. When you are registering as a supplier, you don't have to use your email address as a username. You can select your own username, whatever suits you, and your own password. It could be the same as you use for PCS if you want to. It doesn't have to be. They are two separate sites. So let's go through that just now. Let's assume that you have gone on, registered as a supplier, and then you come back to log in using your username and password. And this brings you through then to the landing page on PCST. And what we would want to do is to go to Manage My Profile and complete some more questions about your business. And I'll explain why later on when we go into the live site. But that would be my first protocol, would be to go in there and add the further company information that they ask for. It's not necessary to do that, but if you do it, it saves you from having to fill out an awful lot of fields later on if you go back to tender for another contract. It stores your information and uses it again. It can go straight to ITT, invitations to tender. But to do that, you're brought through to this tab here that says invitations to tender open to all suppliers. There are only two tabs here, My ITTs and ITTs open to all suppliers. So this is the one that will bring you through for the search. And it did tell you to search for the project code 28170. The way that you would do that is you would go to this filter here, to the drop down, you would select project code, and it will then open up this box here. Project code contains, from the drop down box, contains or equals to, it doesn't matter which you use. I like to use contains because sometimes you're copying and pasting a number and you've inadvertently put in a space, equals to won't find it, whereas contains will. But either should work. And when you search then for that project code, it will take you through, it will filter down to the hyperlink for this particular contract, the management services for the centre, Cumbernauld. That then, if you click on there, takes you through to a page where you can express your interest. Now, before you do that, you would be able to click on this button here to get a printable view, including the weightings for the contract, which I'll explain later on. And basically what that does is it expands the screen to let you see all the questions that are going to be asked for this particular tender. And at that point, you may look at them and think, that's fine, I'm happy with all of these, I'm going to express my interest. Or you may decide, I'm not sure about it, I'm going to go back and have a look at this later on. And if you decide later, it simply keeps the tender in the ITT's old suppliers list rather than your My ITT's list. And you can come back and look at it later on. But if you do express your interest in it, then it will take you across to the My ITT's tab. And here you can see the one that we've just said that we're expressing interest in. And that is now under My ITT's, and I can start to work on it. And when I click on the hyperlink, it takes me through to a landing to another page where I can start to work on the tender. Now, because I was taking some screenshots here, I had to actually go through some actions in order to be able to get from one stage to the other. Before you get to this submit response button, there's actually this button would say intend to respond. So you'd have to click as intend to respond before you were able to work on it. So that's one very simple step that you need to take in order to get through to the page where you can actually work on the document. And at this point, this is where you would start to work on your response. And I'm going to go onto the system live now to show you how you would do that. Okay, so let me come out of here. Go to okay, so this is www.publiccontractscotland.gov.uk. This is where you can register here to put in your company. In fact, I'll just show you how simple it is. If you were going to register as a supplier, you can see that all they're really asking you for are your name, details, the details of your company, the area in which you're working. They ask you whether or not you're a third sector or supported business, whether you're a charity or whether you're a company that employs more than 30% of its workforce being disadvantaged or disabled, and some information about how you want to set your account up, your username and password. That's it. As you can see, there's not an awful lot to do in order to submit your registration details. They'll come back to you very quickly indeed, within minutes normally, to say that you can log in, your account is set up, and in that case then, having your username and your password, you can go back to the login screen. Now I've got myself set up with some dummy information so that I can go in and demonstrate this, and I'm just going to log in live to the portal now. So as I mentioned earlier on, going on the PowerPoint, it brings you through to this suppliers area. Now you can, if you want to, search notices in here, or you can do it through this latest notices link here. It doesn't matter which you do, it brings you through to the same screen. This site tends to run a little bit slow during the day when there are loads and loads of people on actually expressing interest in contact notices and submitting tenders. So excuse me if it runs a wee bit slow. It's nothing to do with my connection. You will probably find the same yourself when you're working on it live. So this brings you through either through the search notices or through the search notices in the supplier area tab to the filters that we looked at earlier on. Now, I happen to know that the reference number is APR 528403, but as I said earlier on, if you didn't know it, couldn't remember it, or you've mislaid it, you could simply search for Cumbernauld and current opportunity and search that way, and it will bring you through from the 13,000 items in the system to the actual tender itself. And it will take a few, it's not actually as slow as I thought it might be. This stage, quite simple information, just telling you that the deadline is 27th of May, but this is the reference site that you would use to search when you're in here. So we go into the management services contract. This is where it tells you, as we saw earlier on, the buyer is using PCS tender to carry out the procurement process. And this is where you would see that you need to search for project code 28170. But there's a couple of things that I want to show you in here before we go ahead and do that. So this is a summary of the contract itself. But in here you have the full notice text, and this is where it contains a lot more information about the contract before you decide whether or not you actually do decide that you want to go for it. Scrolling down, you can see that North Lanarkshire Council is the buyer. You can see that the scope of the procurement, it tells you a good description about the job and what's entailed. It tells you here that the value is expected to be in the region of 5,522,000. That's actually quite a precise estimate, but it's not really anything to go on in terms of what your pricing is going to be. It simply gives you an indication of the size of the project. So that's their estimated total value, and it has no real bearing on the bids that go in at all. It's just for guidance. So then there's a greater description of the procurement again. You just want to read all this and make sure it's right for you. But then it also shows you how they're going to score this contract, because all contracts are weighted these days, different percentages, but with quality and price. So some contracts are very highly weighted on quality and low on price, and others are weighted higher on price and lower on quality, depending on the type of the goods or the services that you're offering. You're offering a service here, so you would expect that the weighting would be higher on quality, and it is. So you can see here, if you look at all the various criteria for service delivery, communications, added value, carbon reduction, fair working, etc. Each of these has a score, and when you add them all up, take my word for it, they come to 70, and the price element is worth 30%. So this is a 70%, 30% quality price contract. You can see that the duration of the contract is 60 months, and it's not broken down into lots. And what else do I want to show you? Yes, the tender deadline is the 27th of May at 12 o'clock exactly. So you can't afford to be a second late. When I'm submitting tenders for clients, I always do them a day in advance, because you don't want to find out on the day that your IT system has gone down or you've lost your broadband connection or whatever, because there's no leeway given for anything like that. You have to have this tender in by 12 o'clock online on the 27th of May. Some additional information I wanted to highlight here was that, because I noticed that you don't see very often, Police Scotland have identified a number of business areas that have a high risk of infiltration by serious and organised crime. So they reserve the right to include enhanced probity checks prior to any contract award. So they're just highlighting to you that if you're awarded this contract, they may well take out, well, very likely to take out much more detailed security checks. So that's all the information I think that you would want to know about in this contract. And assuming then that you do actually want to go ahead and bid for it, then you need to go to the PCSD website and use this project code here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go across to Public Contracts Scotland Tender, PCS Tender. Again, you can register as a supplier in here. I won't go through that process right now, but you can do, and it takes just a little bit longer than it did for PCS. Now, I'm going to log in twice here actually, because in order to set up all the screens and the documents that I'm going to be showing you, I had to register my interest in this contract. So I've got another login where I haven't actually registered yet, and I'm going to use that first. Then I'm going to come across to the login where I have got access to all the information I need. So I hope that makes sense. If I had gone ahead and logged in and expressed my interest and taken all through the whole process, I wouldn't be able to show you this. So I'm signing in as a demonstration user here. I will mention the fact that if you go to manage my profile, which you don't have to do, but if you do, it will take you through to the opportunity, the chance to fill in all your company information here. It will take you through to questions about your company, about you, the bidder, the company, about the representatives of the bidder, that's your managing director or whoever's doing the responding to this tender. Grounds relating to criminal convictions. We're going to see all these questions later on, but you can go to them here, answer them all here. Grounds relating to payment of taxes, blacklisting, insolvency, etc. Technical and professional ability, economic and financial standing, quality assurance schemes. And the more of these that you fill in now, of them you will have to fill in for future tenders. You don't have to do it in here to submit this tender, but if you don't, it means that if you go to it for a future tender, you're going to have to answer all these same questions again. So I recommend doing that, putting in that information and manage your profile. Done that, so let me go back to the home page, skip the stage there. So having done that, you would go to ITT's invitations to tender, where you would say that you're searching for the project code, and that it contains or equals, and as I say, I prefer contains simply because I'm copying and pasting, 28170. That's why I don't like this sometimes. Why would that not be? Just give me a second. Right. Sometimes this does happen. If it happens again, I'll just search for it. 0. There you go. I don't know why I didn't do it before. This does happen occasionally. Sometimes you just have to do it a couple of times. Maybe I typed something wrong. So this brings you through then to the hyperlink for the contract you're looking for, management services for the centre, Cumbernauld. When I click on that, I've got the opportunity here to express interest. Now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I've already done this under another login, because if I did this now, I wouldn't have been able to bring you back to this screen if I'd already done it. So what you would do here is come to this page here. If you wanted to look at the questions in more detail, you could open up this printable view. It gives you access to every question that you're going to have to answer in the tender. So there's a lot there, as you can see. I'm not going to go through that all right now. We'll see a lot of it in a minute or two. So you'll be able to read through all that. Then you'll be able to decide whether or not you still wanted to go ahead. If you didn't, then you would simply choose decide later, and it would not move across to your My ITTs list. But if you do say that you want to go ahead, then you would express interest. And now I'm going to come out of here and show you what happens when you do express interest, because I've done it under my other login. So let me come out of here. So let's assume, well, that's what we have, expressed interest in this. And it then has moved that ITT across here to the My ITT section. First time that you do that, because I've been in here a few times to get documents and so on, this button here would actually say intend to respond. Okay, and when you click intend to respond, it opens up all the hyperlinks that you can see in here, and then you're able to go ahead and respond to the tender. So I'm going to work through this and answer quite a lot of the questions. I'm not going to be able to show you, as Fran said, or tell you what to say or answer any specific questions about the specification or anything like that, but I can show you what you need to be able to upload and what you need to answer. Then we'll have a look at the documentation later on. So I'm going to take a look at the portal first. Before I start to go through the responses, there are 3 of them. I'm going to show you how you can get access to the documents. So when you've clicked up here and intend to respond, all these tabs open up, and in here you have the buyer attachments. This supplier response guide is attached to every single tender that ever is published, and it's a guide as to how to use the system, like I'm showing you just now, rather than how to submit tender, how to respond to the tender itself. Still worthwhile downloading that, of course, but it's not related to the specific contract. It's related to how to use the system. You'll see in here, well, there's a mass download here, but before we do that, I can open up the tender documents, and you can see all the documents are contained in this folder. I have downloaded them all already, and these are all, and we'll look at them, and these are all the documents that you need in order to be able to respond to this tender. So what you would simply do is do a mass download. It creates a zip file. Sometimes you'll see this warning that one of the file paths is too long. You can save the attachments to another directory and download them, but personally I just download them. I think they tend to work 95% of the time. If there's an individual file that's not quite right, you can save it to another directory and then save it to your laptop. But if you do that, then what it will do is give you the opportunity then tick all the boxes, download the selected files, and take them across to save them to your laptop. And I've already done this in my laptop, so we'll come back to that later on. So you would save all this to the tender folder on your laptop or wherever it is that you're working. Batch now. That's a simple zip file download which contains all the documentation. I'll come back to the messages in a minute or two, but having downloaded all the buyer attachments, you can then go to your response and start to work through it. Now, the first thing you would clearly do is read all the buyer attachments. In fact, I do have a list of them here. I have downloaded them all. The one that you would want to read, first of all, is the invitation to tender itself, which is, let me see, yeah, it's this one here, the invitation to tender. We will look at them all, but you would simply want to read all the ones that relate to what you need to submit and be sure that you're happy with everything you're going to be doing. So you've downloaded them all, first of all. Let me take you through the process. The tender is split into 3 different responses, which you can work on individually. And it's not until you've completed all the answers in all the responses that these numbers go down to 0. So as you can see here, in the qualification response, there are 34 questions to be answered. In the technical response, there are 27 to be answered. And in the commercial response, there are 2 to be answered. You can go into each of these individually, and as you answer these questions, these numbers will come down, and you want to get to 0 before you're actually ready to submit, of course. So let's have a look at the qualification response, first of all. First thing, and I'm going to go through this, and I'll take a bit of time to go through it because it's extremely important. The qualification response is the response that qualifies you in for tendering or out for tendering. So the buyers are going to require you to pass this stage before they'll consider your technical response, which is your actual approach to doing this particular contract. So the questions contained in the qualification response, as you can see, there are 218 of them. I've already answered quite a lot of them because I've managed my profile and put all the information in before. So that's why there are 34 left. And these are the questions that will help the buyer to decide whether or not you're a fit business to be bidding for this contract. So I'm not going to go through all the questions that I haven't answered, but I'll go through some of them so that you can see what the process is. So they ask you to confirm that you have read and understood the supplier response guide. That's the one the single one that I mentioned was attached to every single contract. And they'll ask you when you did that, just to let them see that you've actually read the documentation properly. Then there are a whole lot of questions in here about the company, yourself, and as you see, because I've managed my profile before now, this information is already pre-populated, and that would be the case for future tenders as well, which is why I think you would want to do that, because clearly you don't want to go back and answer these 218 questions every time you want to bid for a contract. So they ask you the size of your business, and they give you a breakdown here as to how you would calculate that. They ask you if you're a supported business, and I mentioned earlier on that means, do you employ 30% or more of your workforce from a disadvantaged or disabled background? Most companies don't, but you might. And they ask, this question here is actually a throwback to the days when we were in Europe and used this system in Europe. So the answer to it is not applicable. I'm a UK business. So I don't even bother with the question. The answer is I'm a UK business. They ask you if you're bidding as part of a group or with others, and I'm going to say in this case that I'm not. If I said I was, then what would happen would be they would ask you what your role is in the group and identify all the other bidders, and you would have to download this attachment here. Anywhere you see a triangle with an exclamation mark, it means it's something to download. So you would download and complete the qualification document, which is called the single procurement document, but it's the qualification document for each of the subcontractors or the other, not the subcontractors, the other participants that you're wanting to work with. So if you're in consortium with 2 other companies, you're going to have to download 2 of these and get each one of them to complete it, which you would then upload again. Here. I'm going to say no, that I'm working on my own. Then details about the person who's actually submitting the tender on behalf of the company. Here you rely on the capacities of anyone else to be able to do the job. I don't, so I'll be able to manage this job myself. do I intend to subcontract any of the share of the contract to third parties? Now, what this means is, if you win this contract, are you going to be acting a bit like a management contractor and giving 50% of it to someone else, or 90% of it to someone else? It doesn't mean to say, will you use a subcontractor like an electrician or a joiner? It means, are you going to subcontract that contract to somebody else? And if you were planning to do that, which is acceptable, you would have to list those particular subcontractors. And again, you would have to download this document and complete the single procurement document, the quality document for each one of them, and dock them back up in here as a zip file. Well, I'm going to say no. I'm going to be the factor that's taking responsibility for the whole contract. And then there are a whole lot of questions here, some of which I've answered before, asking questions about whether or not you're guilty of certain offences. So you'd like to think that the answer for all of these would be no. So conspiracy, corruption, no. Terrorism, no. Money laundering, no. Money laundering or terrorist financing, no. Child labour, forms of trafficking in human beings, no. Drug trafficking, no. Any other offence that you should let them know about, no. And have you met all your obligations in relation to the payment of taxes? Yes. I always want to mention this because sometimes people get into the habit of no, and then they come down to here and they just say it's another question. No, you have paid your taxes, you have paid your national insurance contributions, presumably, and have you committed any act prohibited under the Employment Relations Act? No. So there are a lot of these. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see that they're wanting to weed out companies who are prepared to admit to having committed these offences. There's quite a lot of these questions, a lot about bankruptcy and insolvency and so on. Let me just keep scrolling down. Then we get to questions about serious misrepresentation. These are all still the questions you think you'd be answering no to. It's all about malpractice. Then we come to these questions here in section 4. The bidder confirms the name, value, or range of the financial ratios specified in the contract notice here. So what they're asking you for is to submit a figure in here that is the calculation of liquid assets and security divided by current liabilities. Assets over liabilities. Might be a very straightforward question for you to answer. If not, your accountant will be able to give you that information in 2 minutes. And we're looking for an answer of 1 or greater in order for you to be able to proceed or to qualify to proceed with this tender. In other words, you've got more higher assets than you have liabilities. It does ask you if, quite a number of places actually, is if the relevant documentation is available electronically, please state the web address, etc. I just always put not applicable for that, because if they really want you to provide that information, they will come back to you and ask you for it. Not providing it is not a negative action at all. So, and not all information is available electronically. So whenever I see that question, I usually put not applicable, and they can come back and ask for it if they want to see it. Then they ask you questions about your insurances, professional indemnity, employer's liability, public liability. They tell you how much that you have to have, but they don't expect that you would necessarily have it in place now without knowing whether or not you're going to win the contract. So you could say, for example, yes, I have £2 million worth of professional risk indemnity. But if you've only got 5 million of employer's liability, then you would simply say, no, but I commit to paying it. And that is perfectly okay. There is no marking down for that whatsoever. So you only have to say that you have the insurances that they're requesting or assisting on, or that you will commit to get those insurances. You don't have to have them in place right now. Then you'll see here that they ask you, now this paperclip, sorry, if there was a document to be downloaded, as we've seen earlier on, there would be a triangle with an exclamation mark in here. I've previously downloaded this so you can see it. But they ask you to provide relevant examples of supplies and services carried out the last 3 years. And it says here that they are looking for a minimum of 1 example. But in actual fact, when you download this document, they give you the opportunity to put in 2. So I would do that. So they're looking for a minimum of 1, better 2 examples of contracts over the last 3 years which demonstrate relevant experience. So we'll see that document later on. We'll have a look at it. Then they ask you to confirm your payment terms, that you pay more than 95% of your suppliers on time. They are looking for you to put in a statement here of no more than 2,000 characters, but it doesn't have to be 2,000. It could be a lot less than that, of the way that you manage your supply chain and what kind of system you use in order to make sure that the payments are being made on time and everything is up to standard. So that could be an internal procedure that you're using, and all you have to do then is explain how you do it. As I say, that these boxes where it says characters available are always 2,000 every time. Doesn't mean to say that they're looking for 2,000, but that is the absolute maximum. You can't override that. Then they ask you the details of the contract you intend to subcontract. I'm going to say 0 here. And will you be able, now these questions here, are you able to provide certificates drawn up by independent bodies regarding quality assurance for accessibility for disabled people? If you do have that third-party external qualification, you would say, certificates, you would say yes. If you don't, then it'll ask you how you go about managing your quality assurance yourself. But what you can do there is you can simply type in information about your own internal quality assurance policy. So they don't expect small companies to have ISO and all that sort of thing. If you have it, you would say yes. If you don't have it, you give the explanation as to why you don't have it. And it's usually to do with the fact that you have your own policies that are updated every year and so on. Then you put in the name, the position, the date, and the place, and you are done if you've answered all these questions. Some haven't still been answered, but what I can do is I could validate my response, and it will highlight anything that I've missed. So if I scroll down a good bit to some of the questions, well, I didn't put this in, for example, it's highlighting the area, the questions that you've forgotten to fill in. So I would do that. I can come out of this and get back in as often as I like, so I don't have to validate it or fill it all in now. So what I could do then is save and exit the response. Now, it's not exiting the whole tender, it's only exiting that qualification response that I've done. And as you can see, that number of 34 has dropped to 25. So I've still got 25 questions to answer. They are mandatory. You don't submit your tender until that's come down to 0. Then you've got the technical response. And these are the questions relating to how you want to, how you intend to actually submit the tender itself, how you intend to manage this, sorry, not how you submit the tender, how you intend to manage the contract. So the qualification response is all about your company. This is all about your processes, really. See here, it's telling you that the weighting is 70% quality, 30% price. And again, I'll go through each stage of this because it's quite important. So you need to confirm that you have read and understood the acceptance to the ITT document. There is a form, one of the forms that you would download is your acceptance. You have to say that you accept all the T's and C's. If you don't, you're not going to get the contract. And you need to say that you've downloaded all the details of requirements as in Annex 1 of the ITT documents, which is one of the ones we'll look at in a few minutes. So you're just confirming that you've read the documents that they've provided to you. Then they go on to tell you that as part of the procedure, bidders will be invited to present to the buyer on the 17th of June in Motherwell. And this is the format of the presentation that will take place: 5 minutes welcome introductions, 30 minutes tender presentation, 10 minutes Q&A. So that they'll stick to that very, very clearly. They give you some information about the number of people that can attend. You just want to read all this actually, and it just tells you what they're expecting from you in the day. They will then score your presentation from 0 to 5 based on how good or bad they think it is. And incidentally, all the questions that you're going to see in this technical response, they're all scored 0 to 5 as well, with 0 being a complete failure. You haven't answered the question at all, you missed it, or you've just answered the wrong question. From very poor to satisfactory to good to very good. And they give you an explanation of what that looks like. Say, I'm not able to show you responses to the questions today at all. I'm not allowed to do that because this is live, but it gives you a feel for the kind of information they're looking for, the level of information that they're looking for. So it tells you how they're going to evaluate the panel and evaluate presentations, and then they confirm that you have read and understood what they have just told you up here. So you would Just say that you, and there's no drop down box here, so you would just say, yes, I have read and understood. That's fine. Then we get to the technical information which is contained in the invitation to tender, which is all the information about how you intend to carry out the contract. And they have put all this together into one document called the quality questionnaire, which we'll look at. So all the questions relating to your technical ability to deliver the job are in the quality questionnaire, which you would have downloaded in the zip file, which you need to answer and then drop in here. And this is where you'll spend a good bit of your time, so we'll look at it. You need to upload an org chart as well, which it refers to in question 3 of the quality questionnaire, and you would drop that in here. So they are looking for that. Then again, they're telling you how, again, the same as before, how they score these responses, 0 to 5. So you need to say that you've read and understood the process that they've just explained to you above. Then you need to download and complete a document which was in the zip file. Again, we'll look at it, called the Community Benefits Offering Menu. Now, they are going to require you to, the successful bidder, to deliver community benefits through the course of the contract as a legal requirement that's going to form part of the T's and C's of the requirement. So if you are a successful bidder, when you have been paid various stages of money, you're going to be required to deliver community benefits, to the buyer, to the community. Now, they've provided a menu for you to look at, to choose from, and we'll see that. But what you have to do then is upload that document in here when it's complete. You need to confirm that you've read and understood the community benefits assessment guide that they've provided with it, so that to show you how to complete it. And then they're asking you questions about your business. What size is your business? Is it micro? Is it small? You know, if it's 10 to 49 people, so say small. Do you have an operational office in the North Lanarkshire geographical area as below? So I'll say that I do. And do you consider yourself to be a startup business? I'll say I don't. Are you a third sector organisation, a charity? No, I'm not. Then there's some questions about, are you a supported business? That's the 30% disabled disadvantaged minimum number. So I'll say no, I'm not. How many employees do you have in total? I'll say that I've got 30 for the sake of this. How many of them are going to be involved in this contract? I'll say 10. So then it asks you, how many of your personnel, including any subcontractors and agency staff that you're using, are paid a minimum, an absolute minimum of the Scottish living wage? And so they would expect to see that same number there. So, sorry, will you pay? Yes, beg your pardon, I'm ahead of myself. How many will be paid? They would expect to see that number being the same, because they expect you to be paying the living wage. Are you an accredited living wage employer? If you're not, it doesn't matter. As long as you pay the living wage, that's all that's important. But do you have a living wage policy? So you would say that you do. And if you don't have one, I would suggest that you create one. They're easy to make. They're short and simple. You can get them from the web quite easily. And it's super simple policy to say that you will pay everyone in your employ and make sure that your subcontractors pay the living wage. So these are important questions. Do you operate any 0-hour contracts? No, presumably. If you say yes, you have to tell them how many employees are in 0-hour contracts, which they really don't like. They're a no-no. And how many employees would be involved in this contract in 0-hour contracts. So you'll be saying 0 to these, hopefully. Then they ask you if you're a relevant commercial organisation regarding the Modern Slavery Act. To be a relevant organisation, you would have to have a turnover of £36 million or more. Let's say that you do for the moment. That opens up some more screens, which means they ask you if you're compliant or not with the Act. And if you say that you're not, then you just simply say that it's not applicable. So if you're turning over less than 36 million, it's not applicable. Then there are some declarations that, again, in the zip file that would have been downloaded at the start for serious and organised crime, subcontracting certificate. These are documents that require your certificate and require to be dropped in here in your response. Then you have to, there's a form of tender that you need to fill in as well. It's one of the other documents. You upload that as well, and your submission certificate. So these are all documents that just really require your signature. Having done all that, again, you save and exit your response. And you can see then that there are still 8 responses to be completed. And these largely are the declarations and the forms that need to be filled in that need to be backloaded again. In terms of commercial response, there is, again, provided in the main documents that you've downloaded, a pricing document which you need to upload and drop in here, and then you need to put in your sum total as well. Just type it in, which then populates automatically this figure down here, and then you're able to save and exit that response. And when these 2 things are done, that number should come down to 0. When you have uploaded everything satisfactorily, and all these questions have 0 against them, then you're able to submit your response. I'll come back to the Q&A in a minute, but you're able to submit your response. And when you do that, you just hit that button, your response goes off securely to the buyer, and nobody will have access to it until 12 o'clock on the 27th of May. So it's perfectly acceptable and a good idea to put your bid in early, because nobody will have access to it. You're not giving away any commercially sensitive information at all. If you do submit your response, if you decide you want to change some of it, then when you log in and you go to the My ITTs tab that we saw earlier on, you'll see that your bid will be there and it will say response submitted to buyer. But you can still log into it, and this submit response will then be edit response, and you can go in and edit the individual question that you want to change. So you're not going to lose everything that you put in. You simply go back to the question that you want to change, edit it, and submit it again. And you can submit your tender as many times as you like. You can, it doesn't matter how often you do it. The only one that will be relevant will be the one that's in the system when the deadline passes. So we'll look at the documents in a minute, but before I come out of the portal doesn't stay open very long. Once you stop working in it, it shuts down quite quickly. So I always suggest saving and as you're going along so that it stays live. We're going to look at the messaging function. So if we go to the messaging tab, it opens up create message, receive message, set message. Now, if you let's look at receive messages. There are 2, and there's one that I haven't read yet. So somebody here has asked a question today, or it was answered today, about the site visit on the 7th of May. So, or in fact, what's happening here, there's a question, the buyer has used the Q&A facility to publish this message. So the deadline for booking a place on the 7th of May is Friday the 12th, the 2nd of May. Okay, so that's actually an answer to a question that was never really asked in the first place, but the buyer has used that to communicate to everybody what was happening with the session on the 7th of May. So we'll look at that again. Let's look at the other one. I think there might be a question here. Yeah, so somebody has asked 6 questions previously about tenancy schedules and current service of the charge budget and so on. And the council has come back and answered them all here in the received messages section. So when you go to receive messages, you'll be able to see every question that anyone has asked, but you won't know who has asked them. And as long as you don't identify yourself when you're asking a question, nobody will know that it's you that asked it either. So it makes sense to ask questions about the spec, about anything at all that you're not clear about. Ask the question, and you do that by creating a message. You pick a question maybe about weightings or something like that. Give it a subject title and ask your question. Now, a lot of people sometimes say, I don't really like to ask a question. It might seem a bit stupid, but 2 things about that. One is the buyers are human beings and make mistakes. So it's not uncommon to find mistakes in the spec or unclear guidance in the tender itself, where you don't really know what you're supposed to be answering, or you think that the question isn't actually relevant, and that does occasionally happen. So it is perfectly legitimate to go back and say, I don't understand what's being asked for here. Can you please expand on that? It will not go against you. Nobody will know who's asked the questions anyway, as long as you don't identify yourself. So when you put that question in here and send it, off it goes anonymously, and it's responded to anonymously. Everybody else who's tendering will see the answer to that question when it's published, but they still won't know it's you. So it's important to use this function if you're not clear about anything. But the really important thing to mention is that this is the only way that you can communicate with the buyer. It is absolutely forbidden to contact the buyer directly by email or phone during the live tender process. So it has to be done through this messaging service. And say, please do. There's no such thing as a stupid question. The tender of this size, it's quite common to see there'll be lots of questions coming through actually. What will happen will be that every time a question is answered, you will get an email to say that there is a question for you to look at. So you won't be able to miss it, but you can come in here anytime at all you like anyway, and look at your unread messages and look at the received messages. But you will get an email every single time that a question is asked, so you'll know there's something. So in terms of the tender itself, having submitted it all, it's complete. You are now, if you were going to the ITT section, going to my ITTs, this would have changed to response submitted to buyer. Now, while I'm in here, you'll see that because I was demonstrating other tenders that I don't go for, you'll see that there are other response statuses such as declined to respond, and that's where earlier on I might have looked at a tender, thought I'm going to express interest in it. No, I'm not going to express interest in it. I don't think it's for me, and I would hit decline to respond. What would happen then would be that a box would pop up to say, "Can you please explain why you don't want to respond?" And it would simply be so that they can identify if they're making any mistakes with the way they advertise the tender. That's all. They're not blacklisting you or anything like that. They just want to make sure they're doing things properly. In cases where I'm seeing if I can find one, yes, where the response was not submitted to the buyer, that's where I've expressed interest, said intend to respond, and the deadline has gone past and I haven't responded. Then that doesn't count against me at all. So if you decide not to proceed and you don't withdraw your interest in the tender, then it doesn't matter. The deadline goes past, you haven't submitted a response, no harm done, you'll be able to submit future tenders. But you would be able to go back in here, even if this had been submitted, and edit again and go back and change any questions that you want to contain. So let me come out of that just now. Before I go on to looking at the questions, the documents, does anyone have any questions they want to ask at that point? I'll pick them up again at the end.
We've got nothing through the live chat. No one's put their wee hand up yet, but feel free, guys. Let us know if you want to chat with Stuart about anything you've seen so far, or if you want to listen to the live chat.
Okay, I could pick it up at the end, just in case anyone had any specifically they wanted to see. So I'll come out of it just now and go back into it again later on. So these screenshots are just the shots that I used to create the presentation. There are a number of documents in here. Don't need to look at them all because you can see things like T's and C's, the form of tender, the submission certificate. These are for information only, or just where they need a signature from you to say that you agree with the T's and C's that have been put forward. So there's a number of documents in here that simply require your signature, and you upload them to the relevant section of the portal, which you would clearly see where it's got to go because they'll be asking that question. The interesting ones to show, I think, really are the ITT itself. It just gives some broad information about the process. This is telling you the information, a lot of the information that I have just given you. But you can go back and look at it yourself at your leisure if you want to do that. This is the operational management plan, which has been drawn up by the council itself. So bedtime reading as to how they want to go about this process. It gives you information about them. It might help you to respond to the tender using their terminology and their requirements and so on. This is the community benefits information guide. I'll just speak about it, but I won't go through it. It explains what they're looking for in terms of community benefits and why they have community benefits. And it's just letting you know that you need to provide them. It's a requirement of the contract. There's a list down here that we'll see in a few minutes to show you how to respond to that. So these are the T's and C's. The form of tender is just a signature to say, here is my tender. The submission certificate again is to say it's a bona fide tender, etc. Schedule of subcontractors is just a list of the subcontractors if you're going to be using any. The evaluation is again for information, telling you how they're going to evaluate the contract, which is again, I just told you, the qualification envelope, the technical envelope, the commercial envelope. So again, this is all for your information if you want to go back over it again. There's the asset management agreement, the IME agreement. Again, all these are just documents that require your signature. So you read them, you agree with them, you sign them. This was the prior information summary report, which really relates to when this tender was advertised ages ago before it came out as a contract notice. But then we get to the really important documents down here, the last few. This is the community benefits menu that I spoke about earlier on. You are going to be required to provide community benefits under this contract. And it tells you here that what they're looking for is a minimum of 14 community benefit points. And these are worked out down here once you decide what you're going to prepare to offer from the menu. So they're looking for 14 points. So look at your name, obviously, that's not a problem. Easy stuff there. And then there are different things here that you can offer in order to score points under this contract. So you could, right down here at the bottom, offer non-financial support for a community project. So you might volunteer, or you could offer financial support. So you might do, have some sponsorship. Now you see one of these is only worth 1 point. You'd have to do that in 14 separate occasions to get the score that they're looking for up here. But you might do that over the length of the contract. It'll last for 5 years, you know. But you might run a business mentoring service or a business briefing, so you get 2 points for that. Or you might offer work experience to a foundation apprentice. So let's say you were just doing that 4 times, okay? So you would get 12 points for that, and that you were prepared to sponsor something and you're prepared to volunteer. Then that would mean that, sorry, there we go. I think what happened there is I clicked on 10 by mistake there. So there you go. You get 4 points for your work experience. 12 times 3, 12 points for your work experience, and 2 points for the sponsorship. So that would be your 14 points. That would be sufficient for you then to be satisfying the requirements of the community benefits. You can make up that 14 points in any way that you like, but once you've said you're going to do it, you will be held to that once the contract's awarded to you. So I'll come out of that. Pricing schedule. Can't really give you an awful lot of advice about that, to be honest. You're just going to have to work through that and upload it when it's complete. So give yourself plenty of time for that. In fact, it's very simple. Actually, just looking for management fees for phases 1, 2, and 4, and for phases 1 and 2 following 4. So again, you're going to have to read all the information about how to price this job and stick your pricing in there. So it's actually quite straightforward in terms of putting it in. It's probably not straightforward in terms of pricing it yourself. This is the most important of all. It's the quality questionnaire. This is the one where you need to upload it to the complete to the technical section, the technical envelope. And you can see here, as we saw earlier on, there's a breakdown in the weightings of these 8 different 9 different sections. So your service delivery model is going to be worth 15%. Your management staff is going to be worth 8%. Any added value you can add when we come to these questions, you'd see worth 4%, and so on. The community benefits methodology is worth 2, and the community benefits offering is worth 1. They total 70%. The other 30% comes from price. You'll see here that there are maximum word counts for each of these. So when we come to the questions further down, and there's a section for you to respond, for example, when you're answering the Fair Work First question, you only have 500 words, and that's a hard, fast limit. They will not allow you to put in any more than that. There's nothing to stop you adding it, but once they get to the 500 word, they will stop reading it. So there is no value at all in trying to exceed that, because they will stop hard and fast when they reach the 500 word limit. And in fact, at the bottom of each question, they ask you to put in what your word count is. So you need to make sure that you're not exceeding it because it won't be read. So here we go with the questions. As I say, I can't tell you how to answer them or what's put in here. I can only tell you what they are. And you can see that service delivery model is a reading response that demonstrates how you would manage and offer and operate the centre Cumbernauld. So that service delivery model is worth 15% of the value of the contract. You've got 1,500 words to type in your response in here. You do the same with dispute resolution. Simply read the questions, refer back to the specification, and follow the instructions. So when they're looking at management staffing, it says CVs are not required. And if they are added, they would contribute towards the word limit for this section. And for 3A, you've got 1,500 words. So CVs would actually probably be very difficult to submit there. So they're not required anyway. Then they're asking you questions about management staffing, management of subcontractors, how you could bring added value to this contract, how you manage your carbon reduction, the net zero. Fair work first here. They're not asking you to upload policies, they're asking you to type the text in, but you can lift it from policies if you want. And the community benefit methodology. So they want to know how you're going to provide these community benefits, who's going to be responsible for managing the process, making sure if you're bringing in an apprentice, for example, that they're properly managed and so on and so forth. So these are the quality questions that you have to answer. They then get uploaded to the relevant part in the tender, which was, see, before I think, I can't remember exactly, but we saw it in the portal earlier on. And then they're asking you questions here about your technical experience. And this is one of the documents that got downloaded about your relevant experience. If you remember, I said that they're looking for one relevant one relevant instance of previous experience, but in actual fact, they give you the opportunity here to put in two, and it's better to put in two, obviously, than it is to put in one. So it's simple stuff, though. Title, value, who's the customer, what was their address, and an overview of the requirements. So you would want to type in here information about how that job fits with the contract that you're bidding for here at the Centre Cumbernauld. Those are the quality questions. Having filled all of these in and completed them and signed them, then you're ready to go. Everything gets uploaded to the tender and it's ready for submission. And that's it. As far as I'm aware at the moment. So unless there's anything else you want me to go back over or anything's not clear.
No, I think let's just stop the recording there.